Hello, and welcome back to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and we are at it again with Repeats Redux. We're taking a look at text repeat positioning and all of the show on options that are available to us. So let's get right to it, shall we? We'll go into the repeat tool. Let me get a little closer here. And press return to pull up the repeat selection dialog box, and we'll just choose one here at random and press select and just add that. And you'll see that the positioning of it will get sort of lined up with the right edge. And if we go back in here and look at the text repeat assignment dialog box, we'll see that what happens is the horizontal offset gets set to 0, which means that it lines up with the justification and alignment point, which for this text repeat item is the right edge. And the vertical offset is set to 0.25. Now, this 0.25 value is sort of the default when you do this. You can't actually change this default value anywhere. This is sort of set. Finale has decided that's what it is, and that's what you get. Of course, you can change it if you want, so you can just go and change it to 0.15 if you want it a little bit closer to the top of the measure. And of course, we know that if you double click in a measure to add the text repeat in this manner, a different thing happens where it gets put wherever you double click. So that's why something like this would happen where the horizontal offset and the vertical offset get filled out with sort of random numbers. I mean, they're not random, they're exactly where you clicked relative to the top corner of the measure in this case. And you'll see that it will get added like that. Now, I happen to know that if you have zeros in both of these places, the position that this text repeat will go is the top right corner. So you'll see it kind of line up exactly with the top edge of the staff there in the vertical, and same with the horizontal. It goes to the right edge, obviously. If you put in negative vertical offset of 0.333, negative 0.333, what you'll do is you'll get the text repeat aligned with the bottom edge of the staff there. And I think I found out that a value of negative 0.6 is a pretty decent value to if you want to put this text repeat below the staff. Now, I've seen text repeats done like this where they'll put the this type of text below, but then they'll put the a Senyo sign or something above. So you can actually have two different positions like this. It's just that you will always have to kind of set this vertical offset to something and this horizontal to 0. I mean, you could double click, but it's a little bit of a guessing game if you can get it exactly right. I'm a little bit off on the horizontal, so you just kind of have to sometimes make some adjustments and you're good to go. 0.6, and there you have it. So that's how that works. And what else I want to talk about? Yeah. So once you've attached an element, I'm just picking ones at random here. Once you attach a text repeat to a measure, you can of course drag it around, and of course you use a shift key to constrain the dragging either up and down or left or right. The arrow keys will always nudge, the same kind of just like anything else in Finale. You can drag these things further away too. Now I'm dragging this all the way to the left from measure 4 and measure 2, measure 1. And it may appear that this coda symbol is connected to measure 1 now, but this behaves differently than, say, the expressions do, where the attachment point would also get dragged over to measure 1. This is not attached to measure 1. This is still attached to measure 4, even though it's all the way over here. If you double click it, you can still see in the top it says text repeat assignment measure 4. So this thing is definitely attached to measure 4. Any actions taking will happen in measure 4. And actually, if you do things like, change where this measure is in the system, if you put that on the next system, you'll see what happens is that, it's still attached to this point, but it's all the way off to the left, which is totally off of page 2. And so you get some weird results. So just be aware that if you actually do need to move something, you kind of have to delete it and then re-enter it. That's kind of the truth to how that has to work. In addition, there is no restore default positions option. If you right-click, you get this contextual menu, which will get you into the repeat assignment dialog box, the repeat definition dialog box, and do a few other things. But one thing it will not do is reset manual positions. So unfortunately, you can drag it around. There's no way to actually reset it to the defaults without going into this window and adjusting these values to those numbers that you have set up. There are a couple other options here I want to talk about in the text repeat assignment dialog box, particularly on the bottom with the show on options. Now, by default, Finale will set this up to show on the top staff only, which will, as you can see, make the item appear only on the top staff, which makes sense. But there are some two other options here that we can choose. We can choose all staffs, and when you choose all staffs and click OK, it does not put it on all staffs, which is somewhat confusing. But why is that? Well, there's a very specific reason for this. Technically, it's putting it on all of the staffs that will allow it to show. So in the staff attributes, there is an option for items to display, and you'll see this endings and text repeat. This is the staff attribute for the alto line is unchecked. For the soprano line, it's checked. And in fact, the way that Finale handles adding instruments in the score is that you'll sort of notice where these this coda symbol is. It's on the top staff of every group. So it's on the top staff of the woodwinds. The horn is its own group for the brass, piano, and the top of the strings, right? When Finale adds instruments, it unchecks this by default when it adds an instrument to a group that's not the first instrument. So again, the soprano will have it checked, but it will not be checked for the alto, tenor, or baritone. Of course, we can change this if we really want to, so we can go to the tenor line and check the endings and text repeats option, and now it will show there because that show on all staves option is allowing it to show there. So, technically it's, it says show on all staves, but it's really show on all staves that will allow it to show. Interestingly, the top staff only option kind of ignores that. So if for whatever reason, not that you would ever do this, your top staff attributes had this unchecked, it will still be there. So that show on top staff only option is actually forcing onto the top staff no matter what the staff attributes is. So that's just an interesting little thing about that. And then the other option here is the staff lists. Now, the staff list is somewhat similar to the score list and expressions. It allows us to put these items on any set of staffs that we want. We just have to sort of set it up. There's a couple major differences between the staff list from the text or from the repeat tool and the score list from the expression tool. The first is that we actually have an almost unlimited number of staff lists that we can add. You may know that the score list and the expressions, you're limited to having only 8 of them. With the repeats, you can have as many as, 1,023 according to the manual. Not that I would ever use probably more than one, but you can use that many if you really want. And so we can just sort of either create a new one or just check one that was created. This is probably an empty one. Yeah, edit. And we'll get a window that looks sort of similar to the score list from the expression tool. It is a little bit different, and I'm going to point that out in a second. So we can, of course, rename it new staff list. We can add one. We can delete this one that we're looking at. And then we have some buttons here to set the score. That will just X out all of the instruments for the score. We can set the parts, so we'll X out all the instruments for the parts. And of course, the way this works is that if there's an X under the score column for a specific staff, then it will show that text repeat on that staff in the score. With the parts, if it's checked here, it will show on the soprano staff in the parts, in any part really. So actually, you could have a part that consists of just the chorus parts, the soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And what you could actually do is just turn it off here, so you would only show it on the soprano part in the parts. That's sort of one way to do that. And of course, we can clear score, clear parts, and there's some options on the top here to show it on the top staff always from this on the score. Same with the parts. We can show it on the bottom, or we could show it on all staffs, which will sort of put dashes everywhere else because everything else is kind of set. There is one other thing that's very unique about the staff list versus the score list from the expressions, is that not only can we put an X in any position here from any column on any staff, if you click it again, you'll get an F. And what the F means is that it's forcing it on that staff regardless of whether or not that option is checked in the staff attributes that I showed you before. So in this example, I know that it's checked in the soprano staff, so it doesn't matter if it's an X or an F, it's going to show on the soprano staff. However, if I put an X on the alto staff here, it's not going to show because it's going to respect the setting in the staff attributes for whether or not the text expressions are showing. However, if I put an F there, I can force it on the alto part. Regardless of the setting in the staff attributes. And you can do this all the way up and down the score, all the way up and down the parts, depending on how you want to see this. Now, one thing that you can do is that if you check all staves here in the score, you're going to get the same situation that I showed you before, where it's only going to show on the top part of every group. However, if you force it on all staves, this will do what you would think, is that now all of a sudden you do see it on every single staff. There's another thing I wanted to mention about this interplay between the show on and the staff attributes there. Let's choose this all staffs option again, so we can set it up so we're seeing this on the top of of every group. One of the big issues with this is that when you go into the staff attributes and look at this endings and text repeats for the soprano, you see it checked. For the alto, it's unchecked. This setting here actually applies to the score and the parts together, which is a problem because if you have it set up like this, what you're going to see is you're going to see it in the right spot in the score, and it will appear in the soprano part, but it will not appear in the alto part or the tenor or the baritone. It will appear in the clarinet, etc. So this is sort of a terrible scenario that you would never want to end up with, because half of your players or more than half of your players are not going to see these text repeats if you use the show on without without the staff attributes showing. So to get around this, what we can do is use a staff list instead. If you really wanted to see it like this, where you're showing the text repeats on certain staffs, but also show it in all the parts, what we could do is check the X here, right? So now it will show on all the parts that have that option checked in the staff attributes. So it will appear just like this. But in the parts, what we can do is force it on the top staff of all of the parts, right? So now this will do exactly what you think it will. Oops, what did I do there? Let's try that again. We want to not force it. Let's clear everything here. Oops, there we go. Sorry about that. We're going to show it. We're going to X the all staves and force on the parts. So there we go. So now we've got that set up where it's only showing on the staffs that have that option checked in the staff attributes. However, like I said, it was forced on the top staff in the parts column. So now it will appear correctly in all of the parts. So if you wanted to set something up like this, that is the better way to do that, instead of trying to use the all staffs option in the show on. So that you kind of want to use a staff list that kind of looks like that. Again, just kind of looks exactly like this: an X where it says all staffs, and F where it says parts on the top staff. Now, I'm just going to go here and erase this. We'll start with a new one. When you add a text expression here, or I keep saying expression, a text repeat thing here, in the show on option, you'll see that the top staff only is selected by default. This can actually be changed. So if we go into the document options for the repeats, you'll see that we get that same little piece of that window right here, show on top staff only, all staff list, etc. If we change this to, let's say that staff list, right, we can select that new staff list that I created, and yep, that's the right one. Now when we go and create one, by default, it will choose that option, staff list, and it will choose the correct new staff list item that I selected there. So, again, changing that in the document options will allow you to do this by default instead of having to change it every time. It will not, however, change things retroactively. So if I had already added some to the top staff only and then change that in the document options, it won't go back and change those ones that I had already added. So, all right, that's how that works. Now, if we're showing a text repeat on multiple staffs like this, something interesting happens when we move them. They'll all move in parallel. You can sort of see that Senyo sign just moving all together at the same time. However, we do have an option to move them individually if we right-click this and choose this option for allow individual edits per staff. And now with that selected, you can take any one of them and sort of move it independently from the group. And you just see me doing that right there. And of course, if you were to recheck that, then everything's sort of locked in together again. We can also select that option from the text repeat assignment dialog box. It's right here, allow individual edits per staff. So if we check that and click OK, it will actually also get checked in the contextual menu. So it's sort of doing the same thing, just in two different places. And let's see, with this unchecked, if we make a movement here and then check it, and then make some other movements and do all this stuff, and we're going to move some things around, and then we go back and uncheck that option, so we're kind of relinking everything back together. The ones that you had moved will move back to the position where it was last moved the last time you moved it when it was unchecked, if that makes sense. So there's sort of a default setting for that, like that. And what else do we have in here? The show option, obviously, we'll just sort of gray it out if you don't want to show it. With the allow individual edits per staff checked, you can actually show and hide them individually as well. So now you can just hide the one on the clarinet line, or just hide the one on the French horn line. If that's sort of annoying to you, that's fine. You can do that. We also have the unlink in all parts and relink in all parts. This has to do with the positioning again, as it usually does in Finale. So once you unlink it, any movement you make to this will not be affected in the parts. In fact, if I put that on the wrong side of the measure and go to the parts, you'll see that it still exists on the left side of measure 4 where it originally had been. And we can always relink, and now it will sort of appear at the, oops, wrong keystroke there. It will appear at the end of bar 4, just like that. And that's how that works. And also finally related to that, of course, holding down the command key and dragging it will not only move it, but it will also unlink it at the same time. So that's also another common function in Finale. When you command drag, it will unlink at the same time. And what else? I think, checking my notes, I think that's it. That sort of covers all of the options available for moving these things around, and also for the show on options, the staff lists and everything. So there is some flexibility in that, which is kind of handy, and so you can take advantage of those if you want. And I think that covers everything for the text repeat section of this series. So I think the next thing we're going to go on to is the repeat options. And I do have some videos coming up soon that's going to talk about a few specific things. So, make sure you come back for that. Like, I'm going to talk about mid-system coda systems, which is a big thing, and, mid-measure repeats and all that stuff. But the next video is going to be on all of the other options available to us for repeats and the document options and everything. So come back for that on the next video. All right, so once again, thanks for watching, and I will see you soon on the next video.